Hello and welcome back. My name is Kennedy Bailey and I'm here with NMBU's Writing Center. This is our PhD webinar series. This is October 2023's PhD webinar and our topic for this month is the literature review. If you were here last month or if you saw our previous YouTube video, you will know that we typically see academic texts divided one of two ways. We know them by acronyms, IMRAD and ILMAD. And both of those acronyms just stand for the different types of sections you're most likely to see in an academic text. So in that ILMAD structure, in that IMRAD structure paper here, it is introduction, methods, results, and then analysis, discussion, and conclusion. In an ILMAD, it's a little bit different. We're putting a literature review right after the introduction, right before the methods section. So in that previous video, we give a brief but comprehensive overview of what goes in each of those sections. Today, we're zeroing in on the literature review. Now, what is a literature review? Great question. A literature review appears in academic research writing following a document's introduction and just before the methods section. It serves as a critical recap of what has already been researched on a topic. So you want to think, in order for your audience to best understand your research, what theories or frameworks or trends or existing knowledge should they be aware of? I tend to tell people if you're writing and you know there's information that if the reader doesn't have access to or if they're not familiar with, they're simply not going to understand your research, you need a literature review. Here, we want to create that foundation that our research, our study will build on, right? So with those literature reviews, we are working to do usually three things. One, build context. So we want to find out what is already known about a topic or how it's been approached by other researchers in the past or how it's currently understood, right? We also want to establish relevance. We want to give our reader a critical and comprehensive overview about how our research fits into all that currently exists. So here's what's out there, and here's a good segue into how I'm jumping in. Relatedly, we want a good literature review to identify gaps. So figure out what's missing from the current knowledge and how what you're doing contributes something original. Today's video wants to give you a foundational overview of what goes in a literature review. However, there are so many awesome resources on YouTube and in different places on the internet that I think and that my team thinks offers super in-depth and often super specific insights as to what you might want to put in your literature review. Here are some things we checked out while making the video. I wanted to list them here, one, to give them credit, and two, to kind of guide you to additional resources. I'll also link all of these things in the description of our video today. With that, let's talk about searching and identifying relevant literature. This, of course, is the first thing you want to do when thinking about your literature review, right? Is have literature to review. And one of the ways that you can do this is to use NMBU student resources. We have so many helpful tools on the website, but what we have that I think is particularly helpful are subject guides. So if you go to the NMBU library website for digital resources specifically, you can organize things by subject area. Additionally, if you're not using Google Scholar or another database search engine, you can use Aurea through NMBU. That is our library's search system. If you need additional help, please contact the librarians. They are absolute experts in this. They are such helpful tools and wells of information. And you can do that by visiting one of our in-person locations or by sending them an email. Just to be crystal clear, I'm going to walk you through how to access the website in a way that will get you to these tools. So here what I'm showing you is the NMBU website, English version. You're going to go up to the top right panel and click on Library. Once you've clicked on Library, you should get to a page that looks like this. And here you're going to scroll down to where it says Database and Subject Guides. You click on that, you're going to see the Database and Subjects Guides page. And if you're looking down here where I'm looking, you're going to see here we have our study departments. You can look for things specific to what you're looking for, and it's going to be organized in a way that is most likely to be helpful to you. All right. Once you're into whichever search engine you prefer to use for scholarly academic sources, you want to think about how you're using technology effectively, right? So what I'm showing you here is some technology tips. Some of these you might be familiar with. Some of you might be more familiar with them than I am. But one thing that I always do when I'm reading an academic text is I search documents for specific terms. So I'm a Mac user. When I'm searching a PDF or a Word document, I hit Command F and type in a keyword. And Command F will highlight every instance of the word Appalachia, if that's what I'm looking for in a given text, right? If you're not a Mac user, you use Control F. It's the same thing. So when you use Command F or when you use Control F, what you're going to see is the computer will bring up a little search bar. You type in your keyword. For my example, I'm looking for things using the keyword Appalachia. Every instance of the word Appalachia in the document I have pulled up will be highlighted, and I can click through and easily see that. So that's one way to effectively use technology for your resources, or for your sources, to make sure you're finding things as quickly as possible. Our next things here, 2 through 6, these are all Boolean operators. So they're different ways that you can search and use scholarly search engines to find something really specific and to kind of manipulate what kind of search results you're receiving. I have and, or, quotation marks, parentheses, and the asterisk, but there are more. I just wanted to highlight a few here and kind of walk you through how they work and how they may or may not be useful to you. So we're looking at a graphic here that I think is pretty effective from Scribr, and Scribr is showing you 3 examples here of these operators and how they work. So I want to find papers that talk about both genetics and cloning. Here I'm using the operator word and, so I have genetics, all capitals, and cloning, and only texts that include both of those keywords are going to come up. If I only want things that include genetics, we're looking at this third one over here, not cloning, I'm going to use the word not. So anything that has the word genetics in it will be included. Anything that has the word cloning will not be included. If I'm okay with anything under either of these keywords coming up, here in the middle we've got or. So if I use or as my operator word, I'm going to see things about genetics, I'm going to see things about genetics and cloning, and I'm going to see things only about cloning. There are several operators that you can use to make your search very specific and, again, to manipulate the kinds of results you get to see. What we're seeing here is and, or, and not. We looked at those really quickly. So here their examples are football, not soccer, right? Quotation marks provide results with the exact phrase. So if I would like to pull up research about Appalachian Mountains, not Appalachian Trail, I would put in quotation marks Appalachian Mountains. And that's going to make sure that everything that comes up has the word Appalachian Mountains together as a phrase, and not just the word Appalachian and the word mountains somewhere else. It's getting specific. In parentheses, here we get to group together keywords and control the order in which these terms will be searched. So in our example here, we have rural or urban and sociology. So we want to make sure we're including both and any combination of rural, urban, and we are also looking for sociology. You can kind of layer these operating terms on top of each other to get really specific with your search. An asterisk will provide results that contain a variation of the keyword. So here our keyword is develop. If you put an asterisk next to develop when you search, it's going to pull up development, developer, developing, developed. It's going to pull up all those variations so that you're not accidentally excluding information just because the word appears a little bit differently. Some more search tips here is that you do want, when you're doing your literature search, to create a list of keywords related to your topic. The example I started this video with was I'm looking for things on Appalachia and specifically the Appalachian Mountains. So we'll talk about mountain conservation after coal mining, mountaintop removal. That's my fake topic for the day. Then I'm going to come up with all of the keywords that I think are going to bring up the most results for that topic. So coal mining would be a keyword for me. Mountaintop would be a keyword for me. Appalachia would be a keyword for me. Then I want to pick up synonyms and subtopics for each of those words. So I'm going to look up extraction or removal or a synonym for Appalachia. You see where I'm going here is you want to make sure you're getting a little bit creative with how you're searching in case that the literature you're looking for is about your topic, but maybe presenting it with slightly different vocabulary. In addition to using those operators we just looked into, you should also check out Google Scholar. Google Scholar does this really interesting thing where it notes recurring citations. So it'll say this paper has been cited 127 times. If you're noticing that something has been cited a really high number of times, it's likely that this publication is influential. And you do want to include influential publications into your literature review. If you're not including something that is widely considered influential, you want to have a good reason and you want to define that reason. But make sure things that are standout papers or things that really change the game are making an appearance in your literature review, unless you have a really specific reason for excluding them. Okay, we've done our literature search. We've figured out some text that we do want to use, some sources that guide our readers, and we're prepared to lay out that foundation for them. Now we have to do the work of actually laying out that foundation for them. So now we want to think about how you plan to present your sources. Consider that here what you're doing is you're trying to create a narrative that effectively presents a story to your readers. So you want to show how these texts exist not only on their own, but in conversation with one another. For that reason, there are several different ways you can organize the sources you've formed. One way is to do that via trends and patterns, so you can look at different theories or methods or results and kind of group similar or maybe even differing texts according to those trends. Another way you can do that is to group things by themes. So if something is commonly examined, all of these texts examine this theme, whereas these texts examine this theme, whereas these texts examine, you see where I'm going? That's another way that you can kind of categorize the literature you found. Another interesting way to do this is to look up debates, conflicts, and contradictions. So if there's a piece of research or several pieces of research that go against the general consensus, or if there's an instance of similar methods being used and showing different results, that might be a way that you want to ID your literature and think about those connections, right? Once again, you want to look at those pivotal publications, if there were turning points in an understanding of a topic, if it got a lot of citations, or if it really changed the way that your field of study viewed this issue. That's a different way to group and categorize literature. And finally, make sure that you're highlighting those gaps, especially if they lay the foundation for where your research fits into your field of study. Talk about what isn't included and why that's significant. Typically, we have about 4 key ways that we organize the literature review. The first of these is chronological. So when I say chronological, I'm talking about starting with the oldest research and walking your reader through chronologically to more recent research. Here you want to focus on patterns and turning points and debates and trends as they occurred over time. Now, what you want to watch out for here is with chronological organization, it can become easy to summarize these sources, and that's not what you want to do. So if I wanted to know what all of these sources said, I would ask you for a source list, and then I would go read all of those sources. But that's not what I want. I want a literature review, meaning I want your scholarly analysis of these sources, and I want you to tell me how they relate to each other. So are they existing in dialogue, and if they are, in what ways? Do they agree with each other? How are you analyzing them? What is the work you're doing to make sure that there are connections being formed that do extend past this came after this? So be careful. Another organizational method is a methodological organization, which is when you compare different approaches to analyzing the same or similar focuses. And this can be helpful to compare and contrast varying results and conclusions. We also have thematical organizational methods. So this is when you organize sources around those key themes, right? And this allows for a topic to either become more narrow or to demonstrate different connections. And then finally, we have theoretical organization, which can highlight various theories or models or definitions or key concepts in order to situate the reader within a given or understood context. What we want to look at next is how we actually draft the literature review. So we've talked about organizing our sources and thinking about the way in which we might present them. Now we're moving into outlining and drafting, preparing for actual writing, right? These are practical tips starting from your literature review's introduction, not your document's introduction, all the way to that very last sentence. So in your introduction, like in all introductions, the first thing you want to do is establish, if it's a longer paper and this is a section, re-establish your overall purpose and focus. So this is where you restate your research questions, this is where you provide an overview of what you're looking into, and this is where you emphasize relevance. Meaning, why do your readers, why does your audience care? You might consider things like timeliness, or maybe the gap that exists in your research that you want to highlight. Next, you want to explain out the purpose of your literature review, and then you want to outline the rest of the literature review. This is a comprehensive roadmap. Something I like to say in lectures is that academic writing, unlike other types of writing, isn't necessarily exciting. We're not looking to surprise people or pull in a twist, right? You want to tell people at the front exactly what to expect so they can know if this is a document or a text they want to spend time reading. So spoil it all at the beginning, start that introduction out with its comprehensive walkthrough, and tell them what they can expect for the rest of your literature review. Now, concerning your introduction, if your literature review is a section of a larger research paper, meaning it's coming after that introduction and before the methods of something much longer, then you want to set up certain contexts already in your introduction. By the time you get to the literature review, you should be able to stay focused on the literature. This is not true if your literature review is a standalone paper. So if it's not part of a larger text with an introduction, a results section, whatever, then you do need to do the work of building that context. You want to think about background, you want to think about what readers should be familiar with, you want to think about those broader picture ideas and narrowing, and you also want to bring up scope here, so time period, location, sphere of influence, etc. Once you've got your introduction done, we are ready to move on to body paragraphs. What you're going to do first is divide into subsections with headings for the themes or time periods or methodological approach. So that early work we did into sorting out how we kind of map and guide the relationship between our sources that we talked about a minute ago, your subheadings should be concerned with that. You've decided how to organize those texts, have organizational subheadings that help your reader see how you organize those texts. And then summarize. Try to bring out the key points of every source that you use. But it's not enough just to summarize. Like I said, if I wanted to read what they said, I would read their work. I'm not, I'm reading your work. It's your job then to synthesize. So combine several sources. Ooh, I got tongue-tied today. And then talk to me about how they're similar, or how they're different, or how they convey a certain point, or how they contrast against each other, right? Then you want to analyze and interpret. This is an important part of higher level academic writing. It's not enough to summarize. It's not enough to compare and contrast. We need to add our own scholarly insight. Add your own interpretation. Discuss the significance of the findings, both in terms of their relationships to each other and in terms of the literature as a whole. And then you want to critically evaluate. So what are these sources doing really well? Or what are some weaknesses? Once again, repoint readers to the gaps that you might be exploring. When you're writing these body paragraphs, what you're often going to see is 3 different types of body paragraphs. Some of these will deal with theoretical frameworks. So you are looking at concepts, you're looking at definitions, you're looking at comprehensive views of specific phenomenons, and laying the groundwork for existing theories, or you're providing definitions. This is our textual review. Some of your body paragraphs are going to be empirical research. In fact, probably a lot of your body paragraphs are going to be empirical research. This is the review of studies that have collected and analyzed data. And this is where you're doing the work of reviewing and synthesizing and critiquing. And then, of course, you have things that point out those research gaps. So use the theoretical and empirical research to clearly define the gap, especially if that gap is the gap that you're addressing. And note that you might need hypotheses or conceptual frameworks or discussion of methodologies in these sections. Finally, in that literature review, you're going to move in towards conclusions. In your conclusion, like in any conclusion, you're first going to summarize the main takeaways of your literature review. So if you're doing a presentation, I tell people that in the conclusion of your presentation, you should speak as if someone just walked into the room right as you were wrapping up, and you've got about 2 minutes to tell them everything they missed. What are the biggest takeaways? What do you need to know? Your document's conclusion does the same thing. Even though you already gave them your key points, even though you already provided that evidence, in your conclusion, you want to tidily restate it, bring it back up, hammer it home, and make sure it's something that your audience doesn't miss. Again, if your literature review is a section of a larger paper, you want to show how the research will serve as a foundation for the knowledge you're trying to convey and for your study. Then work on transitioning into that method section the same way you transition into any section. Provide the roadmap for what's ahead, note to the reader that you're moving towards methods, etc. If it's a standalone text, consider making suggestions for future research, meaning this is what we identified, here's what I think going forward someone could do. Once again, my name is Kennedy Bailey. I am from NMBU's Writing Center, and as always, happy writing.